While millions of people are losing their minds over a game, screaming at televisions, painting their faces in team colors, emotionally devastated because 11 strangers missed a shot, there's a quietly large group of people watching all of this unfold and feeling absolutely nothing. And according to neuroscience, their brains may actually be built differently. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will permanently change the way you look at the sports-obsessed people in your life. Here's the part nobody actually talks about. Not caring about sports doesn't make you boring. It doesn't mean you lack passion or depth, and it certainly doesn't mean something is broken inside you. But something genuinely fascinating is happening in your brain. Something that operates completely differently from the roughly 60% of Americans who follow sports like a second religion. So let's start with the obvious question. Why do so many people care this much? Humans are tribal by nature. For thousands of years, belonging to a group wasn't a preference, it was survival. Your tribe protected you from predators. It helped you hunt, kept you fed, kept you alive. Sports, at their core, are just modern tribes with better merchandise and stadium lighting. When someone watches their team play, their brain releases oxytocin, the love hormone, the same chemical responsible for the love you feel toward your family. Their brain quite literally tricks them into believing that a group of millionaire athletes they have never met are somehow their people. But here's where it starts getting genuinely interesting. People who don't obsess over sports tend to score lower on what psychologists call tribal instincts. Their sense of identity isn't as deeply tied to group membership. They lean more individualistic. They're the ones most likely to say, sincerely, without apology, "I don't need to belong to something bigger to feel complete." And there's real research behind this. A 2019 study found that people with low sports interest showed significantly less us versus them thinking. They don't automatically resent the opposing team simply for existing on the other side. But wait, because it gets stranger. What actually happens inside the brain of a devoted sports fan during a game is frankly a little alarming. You know that specific feeling right before you open a gift? That tight, buzzing anticipation sitting in your chest? That's dopamine firing in real time. Sports fans experience that same neurological hit throughout an entire game, every play, every possession, a continuous stream of microdoses of anticipation and reward, cycling over and over for hours. It is, by every clinical definition, addictive. fMRI studies show that watching your team activates the exact same reward centers in the brain as gambling and other highly compulsive behaviors.
And here's the part that makes it so powerful. It's the uncertainty itself that does the damage. You never know if your team is going to win. That unpredictability is precisely what keeps the dopamine flowing, a psychological principle called intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive reward schedule ever identified. The same mechanism that makes slot machines nearly impossible to walk away from. The parallel is uncomfortably accurate. Your brain doesn't particularly care where the dopamine is coming from. It just knows it wants more of it. People who don't care about sports, their dopamine systems simply aren't activated by watching strangers compete, and this may not even be a choice. Research from the University of Chicago suggests that specific variations in dopamine receptor genes can actually predict how invested someone becomes in competitive spectator activities. Let that land for a moment. Your complete, genuine indifference to whether the Lakers win or lose tonight might be written into your DNA. But there's another layer worth understanding. Sports fans experience something psychologists call burgeoning, basking in reflected glory. When their team wins, they say, "We won." When their team loses, Suddenly it becomes they lost. Notice the pronoun shift. People who don't follow sports are far less likely to engage in this kind of psychological maneuvering. Their sense of self stays more consistent. They don't need external victories to feel capable or worthy. The self-esteem tends to be more internally anchored, less dependent on outcomes that are entirely outside their control. Now, before anyone comes for me in the comments, I'm not arguing that one way of being is superior to the other. What I am saying is that real psychological differences exist between these two groups, and those differences are worth understanding. Here's something that genuinely sounds like a contradiction. Sports fans often score higher on certain empathy measures. They spend hours every week practicing the act of caring deeply about other people's struggles, even when those people are complete strangers in a jersey. So why don't non-sports people feel that same pull toward athletes on a screen? The answer is empathy allocation. Everyone has a finite capacity for caring deeply. People who don't follow sports tend to direct that same emotional energy somewhere else entirely, toward social causes, toward personal relationships, toward creative work, toward ideas that keep them up at night. A 2021 study found that people with low sports interest scored significantly higher in openness to experience and appreciation for art and beauty. They're chasing the same fundamental rewards: meaning, connection, something that feels larger than themselves. They're simply finding them in different places. Different door, same destination.
And let's be honest about something that doesn't get said enough. For some people, not caring about sports isn't purely neurological, it's personal. Maybe they were picked last in gym class every single time until the humiliation became familiar. Maybe they always felt quietly excluded by sports culture, the locker room dynamics, the tribal language, the unspoken expectation that you were supposed to care. Maybe they're consciously pushing back against the aggressive competitiveness that so often surrounds sports fandom. Or maybe they simply never understood why otherwise reasonable adults dedicate entire weekends to screaming at a television over a ball. Your indifference might have a backstory, or maybe you genuinely just find it boring. Both are completely valid. Neither requires an explanation. But here's the piece that explains so much about why sports fans and non-sports people so often struggle to understand each other, and it comes down to something deeper than preference. It comes down to how you experience meaning. Sports fans find meaning in narrative, the underdog clawing their way back, the dynasty being built across a decade, the rivalry that never quite resolves. It works because it's genuinely unpredictable, real-life drama with actual stakes, unscripted and uncontrollable. People who don't follow sports look at that same unpredictability and feel nothing. Their internal response is something closer to, why would I emotionally invest in an outcome I cannot influence, performed by people I have never met, in a game that has no bearing on my actual life? They're not wrong, but neither are sports fans. These are simply two different approaches to the same fundamental human need, the need for story, for meaning, for something to care about. One group finds their epic narrative in a championship run. The other finds it in a novel, a relationship, a creative project, a discovery that changes how they see the world. Researchers draw a distinction here between what they call parasocial investment and direct engagement. Sports fans build one-sided relationships, deeply felt, genuinely emotional, but ultimately unreciprocated. The team doesn't know they exist. Non-sports people tend to invest their emotional energy where reciprocity is possible, where their care actually influences the outcome, where they are participants in the story, not spectators watching it from a distance. Neither approach is the right one. They're simply different strategies for navigating what it means to be human. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who spent his career studying optimal human experience, found that flow states, those rare moments of complete absorption, where time dissolves and everything else disappears, can be reached through an almost unlimited range of activities. For some people, it happens watching sports. For others, it happens doing virtually anything else. The destination is the same. The road just looks completely different. And here's what's genuinely worth sitting with. People who don't follow sports consistently report feeling more present inside their own lives. They're not spending 3 hours every Sunday inside someone else's struggle, riding the emotional waves of a game they cannot affect. They're absorbed in their own. They're the protagonist of whatever is happening, not a witness to it. There's something quietly radical about that, even if it rarely gets acknowledged as such. So what does all of this actually mean? If you don't care about sports, you are not missing out on some essential human experience that everyone else is secretly accessing. You are simply wired differently. Your brain's reward system, your tribal instincts, the way you allocate emotional energy, all of it is calibrated to a different frequency. And there is nothing wrong with that frequency. Nothing at all. So the next time someone turns to you and asks, "Did you see the game?" and you genuinely, completely could not care less, remember this: you are not broken, you are not shallow, you are not missing the point. You're just playing a different game entirely, one that might, quietly and without any fanfare, have much higher stakes.